The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
The president has shown he's unafraid to use military options if and when he deems necessary, and nobody knows that better than Iran.
New warnings to Iran as protests against the Islamic regime grow. What President Trump says about the chances of diplomacy winning over a renewed war. And then a change of heart. A federal judge overrules herself in the case against Luigi Mangione. What the new ruling means about evidence obtained on the day of his arrest. Plus, Paramount's hostile takeover bid of Warner Brothers Discovery is not over yet. Their latest play in an attempt to woo shareholders to block a competing Netflix bid.
One thing President Trump is very good at is always keeping all of his options on the table, and airstrikes would be one of the many, many options that are on the table for the commander-in-chief.
Good evening. I'm Taylor Murray. Welcome to the National News Desk, America's News Now. You just heard from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt today, confirming military options are on the table as the deadly protests in Iran begin a third week. The death toll among Iranian protesters is in the hundreds. And President Donald Trump is considering his next move as tensions are once again rising between Washington and Tehran. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins joins us with the very latest out of Washington.
At least 544 people have been killed as Iran enters a third week of nationwide anti-government protests. And as the body count rises, President Trump weighing a U.S. response.
There seem to be some people killed that aren't supposed to be killed. The military is looking at it, and we're looking at some very strong options.
On Monday, Iran's foreign minister gave these comments, broadcast on state TV.
We are not looking for war, but we are prepared for war, even more prepared than the previous war.
The previous war mentioned appears to be the 12-day conflict between Israel and Iran last summer, when U.S. stealth bombers struck Iranian nuclear sites. After that attack, Iran retaliated with strikes on U.S. bases across the Middle East, though no American casualties were reported. Now, Iran is issuing a fresh warning, saying U.S. military and commercial facilities would again be considered legitimate targets if Washington takes any new military action. At the same time, Iran's foreign minister says Tehran remains open to negotiations.
I think they're tired of being beat up by the United States. We may meet with them. I mean, a meeting is being set up, but we may have to act because of what's happening before the meeting.
Even as the death toll rises and the protests in Iran are showing no signs of simmering down, video footage has emerged from funerals for protesters killed, showing families and mourners openly chanting anti-government slogans during burial ceremonies in Tehran. Iran's latest protests began over crushing economic pressures, soaring inflation, a collapsing currency, and rising living costs, triggering shopkeeper strikes that quickly escalated into nationwide anti-regime demonstrations. And Taylor, President Trump's aides are set to brief him Tuesday on a possible intervention. That's according to Politico's reporting. The options being presented range from targeted strikes inside Iran to offensive cyber attacks.
And Kayla, this afternoon, President Trump announced another pressure tactic, tariffs on any country doing business with Iran. Can you tell us more about that announcement?
President Trump made this post on Truth Social earlier this afternoon saying, effective immediately, anyone doing business with Iran will now pay a 25% tariff on any and all business that they also do with the United States. Now, the details are still unclear, but it's an effort to further isolate Iran economically on the international stage, which would only fuel these protests internally. And Taylor, this is going to impact countries like Russia, China, India, and Turkey.
Of course. In Washington, D.C., Kayla Gaskins, thank you. Well, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says the Justice Department has served him and the central bank with subpoenas. They relate to his Senate testimony regarding the Fed's $2.5 billion office renovation, a project President Trump has criticized as excessive. In a video statement, Powell says the DOJ is also threatening criminal charges, which he says is part of a broader effort to undermine his agency's independence.
This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation.
In a statement, the Justice Department says its attorneys will prioritize investigating any, quote, abuse of taxpayer dollars. President Trump denies having any involvement in the DOJ investigation into the Federal Reserve. Lawmakers from both parties are pushing back.
Congress specifically gave the Fed chair the authority and the independence to do what the Fed chair felt was best in the interest of the U.S. economy. And clearly, Donald Trump is now attacking Jerome Powell.
And Republican Senator Tom Tillis wrote on X saying in part, quote, if there were any remaining doubt whether advisors within the Trump administration are actively pushing to end the independence of the Federal Reserve, there should now be none. Tillis went on to say he will block all Trump nominees for the Fed, including his upcoming nomination for chairman when Jerome Powell's term ends in May. Meanwhile, the National Economic Council director says he respects the independence of the Justice Department and the Fed.
It seems like the Justice Department has decided that they want to see what's going on over there with this building that's, massively more expensive than any building in the history of Washington. And if I were Fed chair, I would want them to do that.
Director Kevin Hassett says he thinks it's important to know where taxpayer money goes. Hassett adds he has not seen any documents that the Justice Department may have handed over to the Fed. Well, Minnesota has sued Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. This is in an effort to block a surge of about 1,000 new Border Patrol agents coming to Minneapolis to protect the roughly 2,000 ICE and Border Patrol agents already on the ground in Minnesota. Federal agents have been facing increasing backlash following last week's confrontation and shooting that left a woman, Renee Good, dead. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey maintains these agents have no right to deploy in Minnesota.
Donald Trump should know. As long as federal agents are in our city acting unconstitutionally against our neighbors, we will continue to push back with everything we got.
Meanwhile, this weekend, DHS has released information about the worst of the worst criminal illegal aliens arrested there so far. This includes several people convicted or wanted of child rape, murder, and drug trafficking. DHS says that by supporting protesters against ICE, local officials like Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey are encouraging the behavior of these criminals. Well, over in Portland, a police officer has now been reassigned. This is following a video that shows him saying he would shoot a protester if threatened with a vehicle. He references that fatal shooting that happened in Minneapolis last week.
Renee Nicole Good, you would shoot her too!
If she drove a car at me, yes.
Portland City Councilor Angelita Murillo says she is now contacting Portland's mayor's office for more intervention, saying Portland police are acting more as counter-protesters than public servants.
We need our police to be a peacemaking force, not a force that is going to escalate tensions.
The Portland Police Bureau is reviewing the complaint against the officer, but takes the same position as the official DHS stance that officers have the right to self-defense when threatened by a vehicle used as a weapon. A man suspected of setting a historic Mississippi synagogue on fire confessed that he targeted it because it, quote, had Jewish ties. This is according to the FBI. This new security camera video was released today. Take a look at it here. Officials say Stephen Pittman was turned in by his father and charged with maliciously damaging or destroying a building. That fire tore through the Beth Israel congregation in Jackson Saturday. The congregation says they plan to rebuild. In a reversal, a federal judge says she'll hold a hearing to get more information about the seizure of Luigi Mangioni's backpack during his 2024 arrest. An Altoona police officer will testify within 2 weeks about the procedures for handling the personal property of someone arrested in public in the state of Pennsylvania. The judge told prosecutors to talk to defense attorneys about a hearing date. Mangioni is accused of murdering United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. He has pleaded not guilty. This afternoon, double murder suspect Michael David McKee appeared in court in Rockford, Illinois. He is charged with the premeditated murders of Spencer and Monique Tepe. The National News Desk, Steve Levine, sat in the courtroom as McKee faced a judge for the first time.
Your name, sir, for the record? Michael McKee.
39-year-old Michael McKee said little during his extradition hearing in this Rockford, Illinois courtroom. His murder charge is now upgraded to aggravated murder with premeditation, which could include the death penalty. In court, McKee did not fight being sent to Ohio.
Mr. McKee believes that the most expeditious manner
in which he may defend himself against the charges pending in Ohio, and to plead not guilty would be to waive his right to an extradition hearing and to have a governor's warrant, and to agree to his immediate transportation to Ohio.
McKee is accused of murdering his ex-wife Monique Tepe and her husband Dr. Spencer Tepe, a dentist. The couple was found shot to death in their Wyland Park home December 30th, while their 2 children were sleeping just feet away. They were unharmed. McKee arrested in Rockford Saturday, where he worked as a vascular surgeon. Neighbors here shocked. The high-profile manhunt ended in their town.
That's pretty wild. Rockford's not like that, like a hiding spot or not like that. I think Rockford's pretty good, so it's pretty crazy.
Just days after the deadly shooting, police releasing video of a person of interest. Columbus police say they matched a car owned by McKee to a spot near the Tepe's home around the time of the murders, and then tracked that vehicle to Rockford, some 450 miles from the murder scene. ABC6 first report details of Michael and Monique's divorce after obtaining the decree. Michael and Monique married in 2015. The marriage ended less than 2 years later. The divorce granted to Monique on the grounds of incompatibility. The sheriff here telling us that he's now working with local authorities in Franklin County in Ohio and Columbus to transport McKee back to the Buckeye State. In Rockford, Illinois, I'm Steve Levine. Taylor, back to you.
Well, New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani joined picketing New York City nurses as more than 15,000 healthcare workers walked off the job today. The Democratic Socialist mayor says the hospital CEOs are not having a hard time making ends meet and says the nurses deserve fair and equitable pay.
New Yorkers have a right to quality health care, as do the nurses who provide that care. My job as mayor is to protect both of those rights.
Nurses on strike say they are seeking increases in pay and benefits, more staffing, as well as new protections from workplace violence. Hospital leaders have called the walkout reckless and say the demands would cost billions.
What these cases and what the court is deciding on is, can states protect women's rights based on sex? Not if they must, it's literally if they can, if it's constitutional for women to have equality.
For the first time ever, the Supreme Court is entering the national debate over whether biological males should be able to compete in female sports. Tomorrow, the justices will hear arguments in 2 cases from Idaho and West Virginia, where state bans are currently blocked due to legal challenges. The outcomes could impact dozens of other states. Coming up, the USDA is freezing food stamp funding to Minnesota in the wake of the state's fraud scandal. We'll have more on the divide between Republicans and Democrats over the handling of these investigations. Then President Trump is doubling down in the fight to control Greenland, the steps NATO allies are taking to try to help him secure the region. Plus, why some Latino Republicans fear the GOP may be losing support from Latino voters. We're back in 90 seconds. than $100 million in food stamp funding to Minnesota has been stopped by the Trump administration over the state's massive fraud scandal. While Republicans emphasize the fraud's potentially $9 billion cost to taxpayers, Democrats say Republicans are unfairly targeting the Somali community, as the vast majority of those who have faced federal charges in the scandal are of Somali descent. The U.S. Agriculture Department announcing that it is freezing $129 million in food stamp funding from Minnesota, the Trump administration's latest hold on welfare funding to Democratic states.
We've got to look at states where there's massive amounts of fraud in the welfare population, in the welfare programs, and try to eliminate that fraud.
The Government Accountability Office estimates that the federal government loses up to $521 billion annually to fraud. Last week, Vice President J.D. Vance announcing a Justice Department task force to investigate fraud across the country.
Those programs should go to American citizens, not be defrauded by Somali immigrants and others. Make it hard for you to get the access to the resources you need.
98 have faced federal charges in Minnesota so far. The vast majority, 85, are part of the state's large Somali community. Republicans accuse the state's governor, Tim Walz, and other Democrats of overlooking the fraud for political reasons.
Because the Somali population is such a massive voting bloc for the Democrat Party in Minnesota, they've turned a blind eye.
Democrats say Republicans are unfairly targeting a minority community.
The fraud is very real. And by the way, when somebody commits fraud, you prosecute, and yeah, you put the person in jail. As an individual, you do not hold an entire community, any community, accountable for the actions of individuals.
A federal judge has now temporarily blocked the Department of Health and Human Services from cutting off about $10 billion in federal funds for social services and child care for 5 Democratic-led states. The agency says the move was necessary to crack down on fraud, but the states argue the administration's effort is unconstitutional. In other news now, as President Trump vows to do whatever is necessary to acquire Greenland, NATO members are discussing how they can improve security in the Arctic. Today, NATO's chief said the allies agree on the risk the region faces from Russia and China, but the fight over the island continues, with Denmark's prime minister accusing the United States of threatening an ally. Officials from the U.S., Denmark, and Greenland are expected to meet in D.C. this week. Well, Arizona Senator Mark Kelly has sued the Pentagon and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth over the attempt to censure the former naval captain. Secretary Hegseth said comments made by the senator in a video last year were, quote, seditious in nature. Senator Kelly joined 5 other former military and defense members urging current members of the military to not comply with illegal orders. Senator Kelly said in his lawsuit he is being punished for, quote, disfavored political speech. Well, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is continuing his Arsenal of Freedom industry tour. The secretary, who you see there, visited Lockheed Martin's F-35 production plant in Fort Worth before traveling to meet Elon Musk for a tour of the SpaceX facilities at Starbase. Now, over the weekend, U.S. Space Systems Command announced a new contract with SpaceX worth $739 million. The company will work to create satellites with missile warning and missile tracking capabilities. Paramount is not taking no for an answer as they continue their bid to buy Warner Brothers Discovery. In an effort to keep their bid alive, Paramount is headed to court to force WBD to provide information about its deal with Netflix. Paramount maintains their offer is better for Warner Brothers Discovery shareholders, while the WBD board of directors, you may remember, have unanimously directed shareholders to accept the Netflix offer. We have reporters all across the country and your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in Utah, where police shut down multiple businesses connected to an alleged prostitution ring.
We've just been wondering, just what the heck is this place? Like, where did it come from?
What gave you the eerie feeling about that place?
Tinted windows, very dark. and then you walk in and it's just a lobby room area. It's almost like you had to be expected for them to open that door.
Karen Walsh and her colleagues were so mystified by this business in the Brighton Point Strip Mall that they decided to go in.
And we're all, hello, hello? And nobody came out of the door. So we're just standing there and waiting. Nobody came out.
Nobody came out, but officers went in on Friday, serving a search warrant on that business and another at Greenfield Way and Fort Union Boulevard.
This led us to an investigation that indeed there was prostitution happening in these massage parlors, and we were able to go in and close them down and arrest the people responsible.
And where are those young women right now at this
point?
We
did book them into jail for prostitution, and now we're still seeking other players.
All right, guys, I've verified that is them.
An evening hike turned into a nightmare for two hikers. And Officer Dakota Gunter, an Oxford Tactical Flight Officer, recalls when he received the call on January 7th around 6 p.m.
After receiving the call, we got in the helicopter, took off at 6:14, and at the 8-minute mark, we located them using our thermal imagery with our FLIR camera mounted on the helicopter.
Now, getting rescue crews to the hikers, however, proved to be slightly challenging.
The difficult part about this one was it's way out in the National Forest off of the Pinhoti Trail. So once the rescue personnel were going down towards the lost hikers, they lost radio communication. So before they lost radio communications, I pointed them in the right direction, told them a good heading to walk. They continued on that path until they found them.
In the end, the hikers were safely rescued, and Officer Gunter says thermal imaging made all the difference.
How IR works is it picks up heat signatures. And with that training I talked about, we can dial that camera in really good to get a very clear picture to be able to tell what that heat signature is.
Coming up, the upcoming Mar-a-Lago event aimed at securing support for President Trump from Latino voters. We'll be right back. Latino voters helped to power President Trump's 2024 win, but some Latino Republicans say GOP support is slipping. The National News Desk Angela Brown takes a look at new polling and a major Latino conservative event headed to Mar-a-Lago next month.
You may not have heard of Latino Wall Street, but they played a major role in 2024, mobilizing Latino voters to back Trump. I went back to interview their founder, where the group stands today when it comes to Trump, new polling that just came out, and what Latino voters are asking for. Many Latino voters broke for Trump in 2024. Now some Latino Republicans fear they may not show up for the GOP this time.
The Latino vote is key to win the midterm elections.
Gabby Baraspi, the founder of Latino Wall Street, an influential group in the Latino community, now bringing heavy hitters to Mar-a-Lago in February for the Hispanic Prosperity Gala.
Masvidal's getting comfortable here.
Including UFC champ Jose Masvidal and other Latino leaders with pull with voters.
This is a powerful room that, people follow and listen to.
Latino Wall Street is racing to reach voters. Here's why. A January YouGov poll shows Trump underwater with Latinos. The latest numbers do show a slight bump, though. Trump going from -39 December 20th to -22 January 5th. And Gabby is feeling the heat.
A lot of people who voted for him because I'm a leader of my community, they trusted me. They said, oh, this is the best decision, and they follow what I say. And now I have many of them writing to me saying, this is really bad. I made a mistake.
But Latino Wall Street still backs Trump, pointing to his economic policies and also mass deportations. But with a clear warning, they believe the Trump administration may have gone too far.
They're revoking some visas, or they're ending the TPS program, and the asylum programs. And all of a sudden you can be legal, and then they can make you illegal because they're taking away what you had. So the whole thing is confusing, and if they want to win the Latino vote, they have to listen.
Hispanic voters shifted toward Trump in the last presidential election. 43% of Hispanic voters nationally voted for Trump, according to AP Votecast, up from 35% in the 2020 presidential election, which, of course, Trump lost to Joe Biden. The GOP, going into the midterm, is fighting to keep that edge. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
Coming up, the legendary athlete who's featured on 2 new postage stamps debuting this week. We'll be right back. Two stamps featuring the late boxing legend Muhammad Ali will come out this Thursday. You can see him here. The athlete many referred to as the greatest was a 3-time heavyweight boxing champion. He also advocated for peace and humanitarian issues. Ali received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2005, and he once said this. He said he should be on a stamp because, quote, that's the only way I'll ever get licked. That's one way to put it. All right, that does it for this edition of the National News Desk. We invite you to join us again this evening as we dig into President Trump's call on credit card companies to limit credit card interest rates. I'm Taylor Murray. Thanks for watching.